So we are from the Adaptech Research Network. We're based at Dawson College. We're funded by the Pôle Montréalais, and I see that Richard Filion is here, who has been a staunch supporter both of accessibility, of Adaptech, and artificial intelligence at Dawson College. So our objectives are as follows. We want to look at the potential of AI, meaning artificial intelligence-based technologies for post-secondary students with disabilities. We're going to report on the findings from 4 studies. 2 studies were studies of students with and without disabilities. The questions for these were what AI-based technologies are used during the COVID-19 pandemic. The second study was on how students use virtual intelligent assistant like Siri and Google Assistant to do schoolwork. And then we have 2 advisory board meetings to tell you about. We also have the results of the systematic review. So study 1, this was a study on the COVID-19 pandemic. It was funded by SSHRC and by Dawson College. The goal was to find out what technologies students with and without disabilities used to do schoolwork during the pandemic. 163 students with disabilities and 74 students without disabilities completed the Lime survey, which is an online platform that's reasonably accessible. This is what we found. By the way, these students came from across Canada, mainly from Quebec, but across Canada, and the survey was both in English and French, and it was directed toward both CEGEP and university students. So this is the results combined. What we found was that what students used really often is Zoom. Zoom, of course, can include captions, which is a good thing. However, as Natalie mentioned in her paper, in the community of people with hearing impairments, this is often called craptions because often they miss words, they put the wrong words, and so on. So is it better than nothing? Absolutely, but sometimes things do come out in strange ways. That's one of the nice things about this conference, that we have live captioning as opposed to captioning. Google Docs. Google Docs was used for collaboration because students who had group projects to do couldn't just get together after class or after a day's face-to-face teaching was done. They had to collaborate in some way. Google Docs was really popular. Google Docs is also popular because it uses speech to text. You can dictate into Google Docs. Microsoft Word was also very popular, of course. This also has speech to text, good grammar and spell check. And of course, you can also dictate into Microsoft Word if you have a university or college-based license, which most students these days do have. Then there are calendars of all kinds, reminders and alerts. The nice thing about some of these is that they work across platforms, and students were using it because they didn't have the usual signals for doing things. This includes faculty like me, who needs reminders and alert calendars for today's presentation. Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams was also used frequently. It's got good transcription with Microsoft Stream. And again, it's used quite a bit, although students did have problems, in particular with Teams. Office Suites, Google, and it's now called Microsoft 365. It used to be called Office 365. These two were very popular. And of course, students used to-do lists and notes. By the way, what we were looking at wasn't so much student use of desktop computers, we were looking at the use of mobile technologies, because what the students told us in open-ended stuff is, where are 4 of us in this household. My little brother also needs to get on the computer. They only have one family computer. And if the student didn't have a laptop of his or her own, and even when they did, sometimes both parents worked from home, plus there was a little brother doing remote learning. So the availability of the family computer was often not wonderful. So students were using their tablets and their smartphones, and that's what we wanted to find out about. Most of these technologies work well for both students with and without disabilities. However, Zoom had problems for over a third of the students. This had anything to do with signal being dropped, people being frozen, audio cutting out, difficulty seeing the PowerPoints or whatever was being presented by the teacher on a small mobile device, such as a smartphone. Microsoft Teams had problems for over 50% of students with disabilities. Apparently, there were difficulties with navigating and difficulties using some access technologies. Whenever for any of the technologies that students were using, there were always more problems for students with disabilities than for students without disabilities. Our second study was funded by Paul Monreales on artificial intelligence. This one dealt with virtual intelligent assistants. They've been called by many different names. These are Siri, for those of you who are iPhone users or iPad users, Google Assistant for Android users, and also iPhone users. Bixby, which seems to be on certain kinds of phones made by Samsung, and also Alexa, which exists both as a standalone device and, well, I have it on my phone as well. So these are the virtual assistants we wanted to find out. We thought that there was great potential for them to assist students with and without disabilities and higher education to do schoolwork. So again, 121 students with disabilities, 51 students without disabilities. Again, Lyme survey. This was from the same sample, but we're only reporting on students who said that they did use one of these things. Not everybody did. What we found is that overall there was little use made of these virtual assistants. The proportions of use were similar for the two groups. There were more smartphones than tablets being used. This is a well-known phenomenon, and the same thing, the more Apple than Android devices. What we also did was we took a look at the different virtual assistants and looked at the percentage of the students with and without disabilities. There is a table here. I believe most of you were sent copies of our PowerPoint in its native form in both English and French. So if anybody wants to look at these numbers carefully, you can do that on the PowerPoints that you were sent. Bottom line is that the highest percentage was Google Assistant. Students with disabilities, 15% of them used it. Siri was also relatively popular with both groups of students, and Alexa and Bixby, not so much. So bottom line here is that students are really not using these devices for schoolwork. Then we wanted to find out if they are using it for schoolwork, what kinds of schoolwork are they using it for? So the results show that students were using it mainly for scheduling, calendars, alerts, internet research, and dictionary functions. Again, not very sophisticated. Again, we have a table, we have activities on the left, scheduling, internet research, dictionary, spelling, timer, reading books, calculator, and translation. And across the top, we have Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa, Bixby, and Total. If anybody, again, wants the details, you can have them on the PowerPoints that were sent. The totals clearly show that schedules, calendars, alerts, reminders were the most popular by far. And most popular means only 21 students. So we're talking about very few students with or without disabilities using these things. Next in popularity came internet research and then dictionary definitions. We also wanted to find out, how did students use these? Did they type or did they talk to it? Did they dictate? So we found that Google Assistant, mainly talking, Siri, half talking, half typing, Alexa, talking, and Bixby, the 2% who told us about using it, they didn't tell us how they used it. So our conclusion here is, overall, the potential of virtual assistants is not realized. In fact, we have a talk that's going to be coming up, I think it's Saltese, called Virtual Assistants Are Not Ready for College. So our third study had to do with the literature, the scientific literature on artificial intelligence and post-secondary education. There's a lot of excitement about artificial intelligence advances in the literature. You know, when we started reading about it and we read, we just Googled it, there was so much information out there. There was a lot of hype about the intelligent digital assistant, teaching assistant, Jill Watson. Apparently, students didn't know that one of their teaching assistants was an AI. There are a lot of wearable devices for students with disabilities, lots of glasses that will tell a student who's blind what's in front of them. There are virtual assistant services like library and counseling. We have some at Dawson, chatbot things. And of course, these are Alexa, Google Assistant, and Siri. So there's a lot of hype out there about it, and we were part of the hype. We really thought that there was a terrific potential out there for using AI for students with and without disabilities. This is what we found. In the systematic review that was done by the CSLP team, they took a look at the scientific literature, not just Google Scholar. They used about 20 different databases exclusively made for scientific articles. They found a total of 41 articles. 20 were empirical and only 6 were relevant. There were 21 conceptual articles, meaning no data, just hype, but in the scientific literature, and only 13 of these were relevant. For the empirical studies, the methods are varied. Some of them were developing a new technology and trying it out with 3 people. Most are quantitative, so there were usability testing for some devices. The main disability groups that were studied were people, not necessarily, no, they were students actually. Students with hearing and visual impairments, students with autism spectrum disorder, chronic health issues, and so on. Again, only 6 empirical studies. So this is what we concluded. This portion of the research was completed only very recently. First of all, there was no general agreement on a definition of artificial intelligence. We really tried looking, we even brought in the Epistole Langue Française version of artificial intelligence, thanks to Christine. We had definitions from Microsoft, from Google, from Wikipedia, and also from the articles. Nobody agreed on a general definition. So this is something that would really help if at least we knew what we were talking about. There are huge discrepancies between the hype, the excitement, and the data. Then there is weak versus strong AI. Strong AI are big data sets. Weak would be things like Siri. What we concluded was that there's a huge difference between reality and the promise of AI. And if strong AI doesn't exist, meaning big data sets for large numbers of participants, large numbers of students, then let's focus on the weak AI, things like dictation software for text-to-speech, and so on. Let's do more research on the weak AI, and that really hasn't been done. In fact, one of the few reasons that we know what is and isn't AI is we asked students with all kinds of disabilities which technologies they used. Then Christine Vo, who's around here someplace, went and checked which of these were artificial intelligence based or could be artificial intelligence based. And these are the technologies that we need to be looking at for students with disabilities and school staff. So now I'd like to hand things over to my colleague, Mary Jorgensen, who is going to tell you about the advisory board meetings.
Thank you, Catherine. So similar, what we did, this study was the advisory board meetings. The study was also funded by PIA, the Paul Montréalais, the same granting organization, if I'm correct. We conducted 2 advisory board meetings with experts on artificial intelligence. These were conducted via Zoom because we had experts from Canada, Israel, the United Kingdom, Germany, so they were from international areas, so we had different time zones. We had a total of 38 participants, and what was very important for us was to have diverse stakeholders so that we could really understand the perspectives of individuals who use AI in different areas. So we had students with and without disabilities, disability and accessibility service providers, faculty members, technology experts, and technology users with disabilities. So next, the questions that we asked were essentially, we wanted to know the present and the future. So we asked, what is currently used, what AI technology is currently used by post-secondary students with disabilities? What is out there, but students might not know about, so they're not using? And what could help in the future, but is not being used or people don't think is already available? Then we essentially took what they said, and Natalie, our colleague, Marciniello, organized this very nicely in an article. Essentially, the first main thing that came up was chatbots. And I think Catherine mentioned this previously, that Dawson already has some chatbots, but chatbots are essentially AI-enabled text-based conversationalists that can be present on any website that can be available to answer questions. So the possible uses that were mentioned by some of our advisory board members were to integrate these into learning management systems. These were so that the chatbots could provide answers to common student questions, such as when is an exam or how to organize course documents. Others integrated into the institution, such as Dawson has done. So a chatbot can answer, for example, what are the library hours, or when is the library open when is the counseling office open? So students have access to that information. Other students have access to the chatbots to find out about their schedule, which they can ask. Next, here I will, just before I start, I won't go through each one. However, during the question period, if anyone has any questions about any of the ones I don't describe in detail of any of the AI, feel free to ask about any of the specific AI that I do not describe in detail. The next category of AI that was mentioned frequently was AI to help with emotional and mental health regulation or medical regulation. So the 4 that came out were Brain in Hand, Empower Me, Seize Alarm, My Medic Watch, and Smartwatch Inspire. These were all related to monitoring seizures. And Wobot. Wobot is particularly interesting because it is actually, it's a mental health chatbot that provides individuals with depression an opportunity to talk through their emotions. There is actually evidence that it reduces the frequency of depressive symptoms by employing prompts for positive thinking, which are commonly used in cognitive behavior therapy. Next, this is particularly beneficial for students because these are AI tools that help increase the speed or improve the efficiency of entering text. So the first 2 are specific types of keyboards, on-screen keyboards or Swift key and flick type. I'm sure these are often on smartphones as well. Uni is, I'm going to talk about in a minute because it's particularly interesting, and word predictions, which is integrated into many word programs, integrated into many phones as well as Microsoft, for example. So Uni is particularly interesting because it is an AI-enabled device which does require a subscription service. So it is not a free, the subscription is not free. However, it is able to convert textual information into sign language and vice versa. So this allows students who are deaf to converse with their peers who are not very efficiently. Furthermore, it allows the student to define custom and unique signs when necessary. The next category was essentially accessing visual and textual information in alternative formats. Therefore, we have many that are used on smartphones and mobile devices like Seeing AI and Office Lens, and CamFind. OrCam, on the other hand, is actually a wearable device, which I could answer questions about later. However, the one that's particularly interesting on this slide is Summary or Reddit's Auto TDLR bot. This is interesting because it's an AI that attempts to summarize long pieces of text into more abstract form, so it shortens it for students. However, there's a caveat here. This is AI that's still in development because research has continued into making these summaries more useful and accurate for students. So it's kind of like captions where it's not quite there yet, but it's better than nothing. On the next slide, this is essentially allows students to access information in diverse formats. So we have already talked about captions several times, built-in dictation features. This can be in a phone, in a laptop, or a tablet. Just press record is a specific app that can be used, which again, if you have questions, I can answer later. However, I would like to talk about Voiceit because this is particularly helpful for students with disabilities because it's an AI-enabled application that understands non-standardized speech patterns from acquired or congenital conditions. Now, this is particularly beneficial because I know for a fact that one of the issues with Siri and Google Assistant is that non-standardized speech can be a problem. So Voiceit seems to have overcome this. So this can be an interesting thing for Google and Siri to look into. So essentially, the findings from this is that the first thing that our advisory group said is, as Catherine has said, focus on what already exists. Before looking into the future, we need to focus on improving what already exists. So improve and optimize AI for captioning or live transcription to assist students, post-secondary students with disabilities. So we want to move away from captions, essentially. We really want quality captions as opposed to captions. There's also privacy concerns that have to be addressed, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, with Zoom and Microsoft Teams. However, I think many institutions have taken steps in this direction. It's also important to include students with disabilities in training data. Some of the ways to do this is to oversample individuals with different disabilities. Oversample, so we have to take individuals with many different disabilities when creating AI so that it recognizes their speech patterns and so that they're not at the fringe and not able to use the AI that is being developed. So this is one of the ways to include students with disabilities in the actual training of the data. Furthermore, if we want to make AI available to students with disabilities, we have to make information about this available. Therefore, we have to make accessible training documents. Now, this means making real-time training documents available as well. So in order to help post-secondary students understand the existence of and maximize the use of AI-based mobile apps that can promote their academic success, the developers need to provide accessible training documents. So these can be real-time, such as a YouTube video, which I think a lot of students today resort to. I know myself, if I'm trying to figure out how to do something in, for example, SPSS, I will go to YouTube. Or it can be a Google document that is a PDF that is OCR'd so that it can be read by speech to text for students who need dictation. Finally, in order for AI to really help students with disabilities, the main thing that has to be remembered is that they are a valuable stakeholder in AI development. Therefore, this accessibility will be a concern from the beginning rather than have to be retrofitted after the development of the technology. I will hand this slide over to Catherine.
What happened here? Okay. I have a portable wireless Bluetooth keyboard, and it does things. So does things like making some particular slides disappear. This was handed over to me because I'd like to read to you all the URLs here, because if there is somebody out there who has difficulty with print or is taking notes. So for the rest of you, thank you. But for those of you who are interested, we have a listing of all AI-based technologies at the following URL. So close your ears if you don't want to hear all this. https://adaptech, ADAPTECH-ADA-PTECH.org/research/how-help-post-secondary-with-students-with-disabilities-succeed-in-their-studies. After we saw what happened over here, we decided we're going to, in future, make all titles a lot shorter. If you want to reach us, the Adaptech Research Network, and by the way, we're bilingual, we have nothing goes up in any language if it's not on the other language. So there's a French-English side. to Adaptech, www.adaptech, adaptech.org. And you'll find a lot of information there about our studies. You can reach me, Catherine Fichten, at Catherine, like the street, .FICHTEN at McGill, MCGILL.ca. The reason for this is, by the way, is that 20 years ago, when email became popular, the fellow in charge of all this at Dawson said, we are not having internet, we're not having anything, we're only having intra within Dawson communication. And of course, I wanted to communicate with other people. McGill offered me email, and I've been using it ever since. So it's not that I don't appreciate Dawson's contribution, I do, but Dawson was back in the bad old days, very slow in getting a move on. That person, by the way, is no longer at Dawson, and our recently retired director, Richard Filion, was not there when this particular misstep was taken. Mary Jorgensen, MJORGENSEN at Dawson College, one word, .qc.ca. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you, Mary. So I can see that there is Gilda who has a question.
Hi, yeah, it's Gilda. Hi, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Thank you. That was really interesting. It's making me think about a lot of things, Catherine. I've worked with you. You know, I'm a translator and interpreter, and I'm not against progress. I think these things are useful and great, but I always worry that part of my job is going to be replaced, or it's going to disappear, or that it's going to devalue some part of the human work that I do as a translator, proofreader, interpreter. And I've seen it with some clients who send me documents that were translated by automatic translation software, and they want me to proofread it, and it's absolutely terrible. It takes me almost as long as it would have taken me to translate it sometimes. And however, you know, these clients don't necessarily want to pay you as much when they ask you to do this. So I'm wondering if it's going to affect other industries. And I know I have like a million questions in one, and perhaps I'm worried for nothing. Perhaps it's just temporary, but I don't know, like I worry about this. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
I do. I absolutely agree with you about translation software having difficulties. As you well know, my written French is horrible. So on those times that I have resorted to using automatic, either DeepL or Google Translate, people have told me that I'm sending them crap. So I don't do that anymore. The other thing about being concerned about translation jobs disappearing, frankly, I'm also scared that teachers' jobs are going to be disappearing, and that Jill Watson is going to take over.
Wow.
Regrettably, I think that AI eventually will probably displace many of us. But I don't think it's going to be in the next 5 years. After that, I don't know. AI is learning very, very quickly. And large companies, Microsoft, Adobe, Google, are starting to spend a lot of money on translation as well as captioning. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think you're right to be worried, not in the short term. Tell them that whatever Google and DeepL produces is craption for now, but I think they're going to learn, and I think they're going to replace both you and me.
Can I just add, well, to that, I think that there might be some concern, but I think that the ability of an AI to replace a teacher or a translator, for example, there's some nuances that I don't think it will be able to, because for example, in the program I'm in, the nuances require that the teacher has to navigate. I don't think the AIs will be able to navigate some of those nuances. Similar with some of the translation, like there's some things in English that don't have a word for word to French. So I think that it can do so much, but it's kind of, I guess I'm less worried because I think I've seen the nuances that's required for some of the things.
Yeah, I agree, but I still think it may cut some jobs out, you know, like it'll do part of the work that in the past was done by humans.
Yeah, I don't think it'll replace though. I think you're right, it might cut some, but I don't think it will replace anybody completely.
All right.
We have someone in the audience who would like to add something about that.
Thank you.
That's Lavanya. Lavanya, can you do you want to add something?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Hi, I just wanted to add that there is, I just, in fact, just a couple of hours ago, I attended a webinar about conversational AI. And there is this company in Netherlands and another company in, called Adaptech in India. So they create chatbots. And the company in Netherlands, they train people as conversational designers. So what they do is, so what they are saying, they were addressing the same question about replacing jobs, and they were saying that the AI, the chatbots and AI have to advance so much that there should be a supervised machine learning has to happen, wherein there is a human there training the system constantly. So the human factor cannot be ever removed because it is impossible. You cannot actually talk. You cannot. I mean, it's, I don't know, it's going to take ages to create an actual human brain. So the human factor will not go away for many, 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 many years to come. Because there is this whole big ecosystem around conversational AI. I was just scrambling to find that because it was a find that link, which is all the industries, everybody's trying to recruit, train conversational designers. So all these, everyone who has been in this translation and UX, everybody are moving into the conversational designing aspect where they're actually training the chatbots. And so that, yeah, that's all I wanted to add. I hope I made a point here.
Catherine, Mary, do you have anything else to add about that? Okay, so we have a question in the audience, so in the chat from Marine. So Marine is asking a question about the tools presented in the study 4. So the question is, are the recommendations interesting according to the experts or according to the users with disabilities?
Oh, those were recommendations from all the stakeholders. So it was accessibility providers, the users. It was all of the people participated together who provided those recommendations.
We put them up on the Adaptech website under Research Artificial Intelligence. And there's really quite a list. We tried to annotate the list a little bit as to what these things do, because people gave us a lot of different names. They threw them out. Some of them said this is really terrific. About half of the people in our focus groups, not our focus groups, our advisory boards, were individuals with disabilities. Not all were students. So what we did was, Christine, can you find the URL? Is that it? You'll find it under research and artificial intelligence. And there'll be a URL, perhaps you can put it up in the chat. So these were the things that were suggested. Mary then went and looked at, again, the gray literature. We call it gray literature, meaning non-scientific literature, just Googling things. And the ones that she found that seemed to be particularly interesting are the ones she talked about.
Great. Is anybody else has a question? You can raise your hand. You can ask a question in the chat. I think Richard Fillon has a question.
Okay. Hello, Catherine. Hello, Mary, and everyone from the CRISPECH. Nice to see you again. I have a question that is roaming in my mind. Okay, your research has gone through surveying students with disabilities, reviewing the literature about that. Clearly, beside the important question that we just spoke about, will AI replace human input in all sort of endeavors? It's clear that AI is there to stay. And when you look at what you had gathered, okay, the real potential that AI devices can provide for learning and teaching, especially to students with disabilities. My question is, what would it need? What would it be needed in order to optimize the potential use of AI technologies in the wake of helping students to better cope with what is here to stay, hybrid mode of teaching? It won't be thrown away after COVID, for sure. So we are in the infancy of AI technologies, basically for education purposes. It is there to stay. It will just grow over time. So what is needed in order to make sure that we're not missing the mark here?
Good point. Richard, I think when we started looking at the systematic review literature, one of the recommendations was to start focusing on weak AI, and weak AI is where we're at. Focusing on how to improve things that already exist. When Gilda said, she gets stuff from these automatic translators, and they're not very good, and they take her a lot of time to fix and remedy. These things, along with Jill Watson's of the day and the chatbots, there needs to be more research. In other words, there needs to be research on the weak AIs. Because right now, the companies are doing whatever they want, whatever I guess is most profitable for them. This doesn't mean that they're doing these things for the betterment of education per se. They're doing it for the betterment of the companies. And when it comes to students with disabilities, well, that's an interesting one, because in the United States, where a lot of our technologies come from, there are very strong laws, and people get sued. Big companies get sued. Universities get sued. I was watching a webinar. It said that last year there were 5,400 and something legal suits related to disability that were launched in America, and most of them are successful. So a lot of stuff that is coming in for accessibility is probably better than stuff that's coming in for education, because for education, nobody sues. Whereas if you're blind or deaf or have a print impairment or whatever, people have sued. How this is translated into the French milieu, I am not that sure. Last time, Gilda, you were not at a CAPS yet, but I thought that the first time when we had, I think it was dictation in Office 365, and I remember going to the CAPS office saying, look, we can now dictate how much easier life is going to be for students with some print impairments. And of course, CAPS had a French language office, and we never found that particular function. It was there because the Americans made it there because of accessibility legislation, and it was not there for Francophone Canadians. I think they've gotten better at it because France itself is also looking for accessibility. So I think things have improved, but I'm not sure how much all the technologies have improved for accessibility. For education, I'd like to see some research being done, some real research, as opposed to a company saying, hey, we have a new product for you, a new learning management platform. We're McGraw-Hill, we're Worth Publishers. They're doing their own thing. And
Catherine, if we want better research and more quality, I think that the best way to encourage that is to have it become a priority for the institutions so that the researchers feel that this is an area of research that's important, because right now it's important for like McGraw-Hill, it's important for IBM to do Jill Watson because they make money off of this. But right now, if it's not a priority in the institution and there's no money put aside to improve this in the institution, the research might not get done. But if it's made a priority, then people might take the time to do the required research and improve the quality.
Well, thank you. I think that's a really interesting debate, and I would like to keep going the conversation, but we still have a few questions in the chat. So.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask one question about. About research areas in this. I've just started to look for research areas which connects AI. You know how AI can be useful in chatbots for sign language. A couple of reasons the reasons why it's driving me towards this area is there is this huge community of a percentage of population is deaf and dumb, and it's important to making sign language more accessible to everybody, to parents and schools, and yeah, that is, I think, one of the reasons why I want to do research in this area. So yeah, what are your thoughts about it? I did come across a app called HandTalk, and you were also mentioning about an app called UNI.
UNI is actually a device. It's not an app per se.
Oh, I see.
It's actually a device that does the translation. It's not an app.
So any thoughts in this area?
There is some literature. They're very preliminary articles, and most of them are busy. They've gotten past finger spelling. They've gotten a bit better than that. I have come across some stuff, but it was very, very basic. I think they're having trouble because not only is sign language, either LSQ or ASL, a different language, but it's a language of gestures.
Yes.
And so you can't simply have hands. There's more than that. There's facial expressions, there's the positioning of the hands and so on. So they're having trouble. There are articles though, if you do just a regular Google search on AI and sign language, you will find some articles, not too many. I would say no more than 5.
Okay.
And if you have trouble with them, I can dig them up because I've read them.
I see.
I wasn't very impressed, but I did read them.
Thank you so much. I'm only just starting out, so I'm not able to make a proper case, as you can see. But yes, I'm planning to pursue this area. Thank you so much for your thoughts and support.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Mary. Unfortunately, it's already 1 p.m., so we won't have time for more official questions. But if you want, if you still have a little bit of time, you can stay a little bit longer. So I'm gonna end officially the talk, and then if you want to stay to ask a few more questions to Catherine and Mary, you are invited to do so. So to finish, I'm just gonna start again, share again my screen. As I said at the beginning, this conference was part of a series of 7 conferences. And this one was the 6th one, and the next one is the last one. And it's going to be in French this time. It's going to be held on the 5th of May. So it's going to be a Wednesday too, from noon to 1 p.m. Again, the access is free. So as I said, it's going to be in French, but there will be a simultaneous interpretation in English. And we will keep talking about technology and students from colleges. So it's going to talk about the anxiety that all this technology is creating with students. So again, thanks again for coming. It's really nice to see you in a great number. Thanks again, Catherine. Thanks again, Mary. Have a great day and see you soon.